Welcome to the Adaptive Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hotho. On today's episode, we're going to hear from Jocelyn Casker. Jocelyn is an upper 2-point of contact athlete. That means that her disability impacts her upper extremities, but she can still have 2 points of contact on a rig or a barbell or an implement. Through her story, you'll hear about the power of connection, community, and what it's like growing up with a disability and still wanting to be active. Now, before we begin, a little bit about me and about this project that we're embarking on together. I'm a neuromuscular moderate athlete who competes in CrossFit. I have cerebral palsy affecting the right side of my body, and I have always wanted to tell the stories of the athletes and competitors that I've met over the past 2 years through competitive CrossFit. I've been to the 2023 WheelWOD Games, and I was at the 2024 Adaptive CrossFit Games. And I saw so many athletes and competitors, and I wanted to create a space where their stories could be told and shared in their own voices. So throughout this podcast, you'll hear stories from adaptive CrossFitters and athletes in the adaptive space about how they've overcome their disabilities, overcome challenges, and how they train today. There's a good chance that you or someone you know knows somebody with an adaptation, with a disability, who would benefit from adaptive CrossFit or adaptive fitness in general. And my hope is that through this podcast, you'll hear a story or an anecdote that might connect with you or connect with them and get them to start the journey. So without further ado, check out this interview with Jocelyn Casker. I'm here with Jocelyn Casker, and she's an adaptive athlete that I've had the privilege of meeting through WheelWOD and then through the CrossFit Games. So Jocelyn, welcome to this little experiment that we're trying, which is an adaptive athlete podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So I thought we'd just get it right out of the way with why are you adaptive? What's the thing that makes you an adaptive athlete?
So I was born with a genetic condition. It really doesn't have a name. So
Okay.
kind of like one in a million, more than that. And so it affects my whole body from head to toe. So I basically, for CrossFit, as an adaptive athlete, I just kind of had to pick my most impaired concern and just go with that as my
Yeah.
division. So for me, like in my hands, I have no joints. So it's like a bone fusion disorder. So I can't bend. This is my fist. So I can't bend any of my fingers. I can bend my thumbs like normal. But other than that, like that's my grip.
What
So
about that joint on your index finger or your middle
no.
finger? That's
Yeah.
not
So I just have
bendy.
this.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the only two. I have my top, middle, and then my thumb. But
Wow.
luckily, I'm very lucky that like at the base of my hand, they all bend.
Yeah.
So I think that saves me from like breaking my fingers a lot, which is
Yeah.
great. But yeah, so that's like my main impairment. It's my hands. And then in my left elbow, I cannot fully extend. So my left arm is like a solid like inch shorter than my right
Hmm.
arm. And that comes with a lot of just pain when I'm working out. So as an upper extremity athlete, which is the division I chose, it luckily really focuses on like one armed movement. So I primarily am able to use my right arm and kind of stay out of my left arm pain for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I wear hearing aids because I'm hearing impaired. I've got most of my toes are missing. I've got ligaments in the wrong place in my knees. You name it, I've got it.
So it
Yeah.
impacts basically joints, largely
Yes.
joints and kind of
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And then you were mentioning like some bones in your ears too that kind of fused together, which led to the hearing loss.
Yeah. Yeah. So they didn't pick up on my hearing loss till I was maybe like two.
Mhm.
And yeah, all the bones in my middle ear are fused, so they don't vibrate correctly. So when sound enters your ear, those bones are supposed to vibrate. They'll go down the nerve. They'll transmit into the nerve to your brain for your brain to understand it. But if your bones don't vibrate at all, that message will never get through, right? But
Yeah.
for me, if it's loud enough, then it just kind of bypasses that and the message still gets sent down the nerve so my brain can understand it. So if you get in my car, the radio's loud, the TV's loud, everything's loud.
I love it. So when you're like
Yeah.
competing on the floor and the crowd is roaring, like do you have your hearing aids in them when you compete?
Yeah, sometimes I've been trialing actually doing things without my hearing aids. So I went to Wadapalooza for the first time last year, 2024. And, when it's raining, I can't wear my hearing aids. If I'm in the water, I can't
Mm,
wear my hearing aids. And that was like a very anxiety provoking situation that I didn't expect. Like, I only take my hearing aids out when I'm sleeping. So I'm never really like cognizant of my hearing loss. And so having to like be in front of a bunch of people doing something that I'm already not comfortable with, like swimming in open water without my
Yeah.
hearing aids in, I was like really stressed out. So now in the gym, like in the summer when it's really hot here in Chicago, I will take my hearing aids out just so I can like be used to not wearing them. Or every now and then I'll just take them out and like no music, nothing, just doing my workout, not able to hear a thing, just so I can kind of like get more used to that.
Yeah. Do you feel that
Yeah.
that kind of helps you zone in a little bit more?
Ah,
Okay.
yeah, now that it doesn't stress me out. Yes.
Yeah.
Because before I
That's
would be worried that I'm missing something or like, oh, something dangerous is happening and I have no idea. But now I'm like,
Mhm.
no, I'm in the most controlled environment literally possible. And yeah, I'm able to really like hone in on like how I'm moving and what I'm feeling and focusing on my breathing. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's fun about being an adaptive athlete sometimes is some of the ways that we get to try new things is different than like, oh, I
Yeah.
tried a different supplement or something. It's like literally like, no,
Right.
I removed a sense that something was giving me that sense. And so I
Yeah.
went back to like my natural sort of way of being and discovered something through that.
Right, and it's cool too. Well, it's funny because a lot of people don't realize that I wear hearing aids. Like they're really not that noticeable at the end of the day. So when I'm in the gym and I have like headphones on, I hear my music, but I don't hear anything else, right? Because my
Mhm.
music's blaring in my ears. So like even today I'm doing something and someone was trying, I think they were trying to ask me if like something was in my way, and I'm just blank staring at them like, I don't know what like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're asking me. And I'm just like, no, like, I either say yes or no and hope it's the right answer.
Yeah, yeah. That
Yeah.
was the right thing to say. So when did you get into CrossFit?
So I started CrossFit, oh gosh, in 2021.
Okay.
So I moved to Chicago in 2019 from the
Okay.
East Coast,
And then
and
pandemic. Great move.
pandemic happened. I'm a healthcare worker, so like I
Okay.
was shoulder deep in all of that throughout 2020 and then the beginning of 2021. And it was around like May where I just like was at my wit's end. I was like, I have been working nonstop. The only people I know are elderly because I work in a nursing home, or like my coworkers who are significantly older than me. And I was just like, I need to do something. So I started like just walking around the city and just like exploring my neighborhood and seeing what's out there. And I walked by my gym, PXM, and I was like, I don't know, like that's not up my alley. Like I don't think I would enjoy that. But then that it kept appearing on my walking route and I was getting more and more curious. It's like, you know what, I'll just set up like an appointment just to like talk with them and see. And the day I showed up, they were doing Murph.
Oh
And
my
I was like,
gosh.
what in the world is happening? There are like 50 people in the gym right now doing this insane workout. I'm like, I don't even understand what's going on. But it had what I was looking for, right? I was looking for a social connection. And
Hmm.
I walk in there and there's this massive community doing a workout together. And I was like, this is what I'm looking for. And so, yeah, I never looked back once I started.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
That would be funny to have your first CrossFit experience be Murphy. Like, do you guys wear these weight vests all the
You
time?
want to know something funny? I've never done Murph. I have
Ever?
gotten out of it every single year somehow.
Nice, nice. So, did you do any fitness before CrossFit?
Yeah, I did a lot of more like bodybuilding type stuff.
Okay.
Like I would just follow basic bodybuilding strengthening,
Hmm.
basically. So I started that in college. So like, I don't know, maybe in 2014, 2015, I started
Okay.
doing some bodybuilding stuff like at the gym there because I did sports growing up too. So I've been pretty athletic my whole life. And I enjoyed doing bodybuilding. It was really fun. I saw amazing results from doing that. And I think that kind of catapulted me being interested in like growing my strength even more.
Yeah.
Because if you know me, you know I am very much a strength athlete. And
Yes.
so, like, I think having that foundation was really helpful in just kind of catapulting my interest in strength too.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's so when you were doing sports as a kid, I mean,
Yes.
did that help you not feel different? Did it emphasize how different you were? Like,
Um, I don't know. I never really noticed.
okay.
So I don't know if you ever went through this, but when I was growing up, I like refused to acknowledge that I was disabled in any way. I was just
Mm.
like, no, I like it's like no, I'm good. Like I can do everything like everyone else, and it's not a big deal. Like I'm not disabled, and like we're almost refusing to own that term. So like I
Okay.
played basketball, I did field hockey, and I think, like, reflecting back now, I definitely had moments where I was like, "Oh, this is a lot harder for me than everyone else," but I just refused to acknowledge it for so long,
Hmm.
and it kind of, like, I don't think I really came to a head with that until I started doing CrossFit. Truly, like, well into my adulthood of being like, "Oh, no, like, there genuinely are things that I can't do, but if I could do them a different way, then I can do them, and,
Hmm.
like, that's fine." You know? And, like, it yes, doing sports were, like, awesome, and I had such a great time doing them, and, like, you learn so many skills and stuff like that, but I do think had I have been able to, like, embrace who I actually was, I think it could have been a totally different experience at the same time.
Yeah. Do you mean doing like para sports as a kid, or
No.
just being able to be like, I'm going to play field hockey, and can you guys
Yeah.
adapt for me to be
Yeah.
to be a disabled athlete playing field hockey for
Yeah,
you guys? Yeah.
because my default was like, okay, I would almost think of it as like, how can I do the least amount of work, right?
Mm,
Like, and I just thought that meant I was lazy. No, it's just like they're playing field hockey's hard because I can't really hold the stick like that. So that's
yeah.
why I didn't like those positions. That's why I was goalie because I had all the gear on and like one hand I didn't have to hold the stick, and then the other hand you have a whole glove on that's holding the stick for you,
Right.
right? So I found ways around it without realizing that's what I was doing. Or like with basketball, I would have trouble holding the ball, so I was center, where I really wasn't like the main shooter or anything, but I'm a big girl, so I could defend people and like use my body that way instead of like figuring out how to hold the ball and like dribble the ball was really challenging. And just like I kind of just like found ways around it without realizing that's what I was doing.
Mm, that's really interesting. I wish I'd had that experience as a child. For me, I was more of a I think maybe it's being a boy, being a middle child,
Mm,
having an older brother who kind of picked on me a little
mm,
bit. I kind of went inward a little bit and didn't
mhm.
had some bad experiences in sports and then just said, "Oh, I guess they're
Okay,
not for
yeah.
me." And so my first real athletic experiences were actually CrossFit
Okay.
in like 2018, and then more primarily in like 2022 when I really
Okay.
dove back into it. Um, and for me, with a neuromuscular condition, it was more like you
Mhm.
go to PT all the time, right?
Yeah.
I don't. Did you have to? You probably never went to PT, or did you go to OT
Well,
or anything like that? For
no.
yeah.
I grew up as a Shriners kid, so I went to the Shriners Hospital from, like, when I was 6 weeks old, and then they dismissed me when I was, like, 16, 17.
Okay.
So I never got therapy that I can remember through them because for the most part, I was okay, right? Like,
Hmm.
I was figuring everything out. So they were more just, like, monitoring me to make sure that, like, as I was growing, other things didn't develop. Like they were very concerned about my spine and like,
Yeah.
will I have any fusions in my spine or anything like that? But like, I figured out how to write. I write kind of in a funny way, but like it works for me. I hold my
Yeah.
forks in a way that worked for me. And so they were like, no, there's no like real functional reason that I needed therapy. So I'm kind of glad that I was in an environment that recognized that like, oh, she's doing it in a way that works for her. We don't need to like streamline her into therapy to make her do it a certain way. So
Okay.
I didn't even need speech therapy. Like I was pretty lucky.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then let's go back to the CrossFit side of
Yeah.
things. So when you walk into PXN, I
Yeah.
mean, I know you now with
Yeah.
Lamont and with your coach and that kind of stuff, but what was
Yeah.
that early journey like in CrossFit? I mean, there's so many movements, so
Yeah.
much intensity that I feel like for anybody who's adaptive, you hit the wall quick with like, okay, this is where my disability is holding me up.
Oh my gosh, yes. So when I started CrossFit, I like to joke that I say that I like raw dog CrossFit for the first like year and a half. No assistive devices, no straps, nothing. I didn't
Yeah.
even know they were like a thing, right? Because I never used them when I was doing bodybuilding stuff. So I go in there, I'm like just holding a barbell with my little hands,
Oh my
trying to
gosh.
figure out how to snatch, trying to figure out all of those movements and like getting kind of annoyed because feeling like I could be stronger, but I just couldn't lift the weight, right? Like trying to figure out like, okay, I understand how to snatch, but like I can only hold 45 pounds before my hands give out because if I'm that wide, like I
Yeah.
really have no grip. Or with my cleans, I have old videos of me learning to clean and jerk, not using any straps. I'm just like, how? Like, how? It's just pure, like, pure grit trying to figure out how to do it.
And some
Um,
college kid with like an L1 is like, just do a hook grip. Just do it. And you're like,
no. I remember one time I got a cue when I was in class because not all the coaches knew me for a while and like
Yeah.
what my disability was. I remember a coach from like across the gym. I must have been doing like overhead something. And then I got a cue of like, you need to straighten your arms. And I'm in the middle of it. I'm like, I can't.
Can't.
Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. So it was definitely a learning curve until I met Lamont and he was like, hey, you like don't have to do it this way, right? Like you can use these other things and they might be helpful for you. I was like, oh, okay. And so I started experimenting with it. And that's when it just really took a turn and like took off.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then from there, you went to was the Wheelwad Games in 2023 your first competition, big competition, or had you done
Yes.
Wheelwad before that? Okay.
No. So yeah, the games in 2023 were my first one.
Yeah.
So I was just there to learn and like see how I could do in that type of setting. And I don't know about you, like when you first went to your first adaptive competition, I was just, I feel like I was like in a trance all weekend because I was like, I can't believe I'm around this many people who understand what it's like.
Yes.
And it's not a, it was so, how do I want to word this? It was so easy to be honest about how you were doing and why you're there. Whereas I think sometimes in the gym, it's when you train alone or you're the only adaptive athlete in your gym, people just see you as another athlete in your gym, right? And
Hmm.
they don't really see all the things that you're doing to accommodate for yourself or how you're like modifying things. But when you're there, you can see everyone. You can say, "Oh, hey, I see you have trouble with this. Have you tried this?" And it's just like an open dialogue. And I just feel like my whole world opened up in a
Yeah.
way that I was not expecting at all.
I completely agree. And that feeling of a trance, I would say that's how I felt after the first Wheelwad, to the point where after it
Yeah.
ended, I actually, we talk about mental health stuff, you and I, and so I actually had a
Yeah.
panic attack. I actually had a panic attack
Really.
when it ended, like, and the only thing I could say to myself was like, I'm going to be so alone when this is over. And it
Yeah.
was just that vibe of, I have never been around that many disabled people in a room.
Yeah.
There's people going around in wheelchairs, there's short stature athletes, there's athletes missing legs and arms,
Limbs. Yeah.
and we're just all one. We're just all a
Yeah.
community connected by the fact that we've all had to adapt and continue to adapt to get to where we are in our lives, right?
Yeah.
So then fast forward to the games in 2024, which you were
Mhm.
luckily able to make, and we're
Yeah.
walking into the convention center, and I'm just like, oh, the feeling was completely different. The feeling
It
was my people
was.
have gathered. My people are
Yeah. It
here now,
was like a
right?
reunion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And meeting new people who were there for their first time, you're like, oh, you are in for a treat. This is
Could
the
you
coolest thing.
imagine could you imagine 2024 games being your first adaptive experience?
I don't
That
know. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I think it would have been really challenging, kind of like in the way that you said. I remember having that feeling coming home after 2023 and being like, well, now what am I supposed to do? Like, I
Hmm.
really am. Like, I knew I was training alone as an adaptive athlete. I was like, wow, I really am alone. And that
Yeah.
is, it was so hard to like kind of come to terms with that because I would
Hmm.
rather be with my people. I would rather, be with people who understand. But I think too, realizing that I have a team with me who they do understand as well as they can,
Yeah.
right? And some of the onus is on me of being honest with how things are, right? I think for a while it was so easy just to be like, oh yeah, no, everything's fine. But now I'm on this journey of saying, hey, Lamont, my coach, my elbow really hurts when I do this, and I don't think it should. Is there a way we can modify it? Okay, yeah, let's try to problem solve it. Or, instead of just like, oh, it's fine, it always hurts. It's not a big deal. No one
Hmm.
can work with that unless we as athletes like put the onus on ourselves to say, like, we need help with this, or like I need a support team to like help me through this. And
Yeah.
I think that's what helped me get over the hump of like I have that team there. I need to use them, even if they're not adaptive themselves.
Yeah. And learning how to articulate the particular
Hmm.
ways that it's impacting us, right? And being able to say that to an able-bodied person.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Um,
they'll never get it, right? They
yeah.
won't.
Even
And
the most
even
empathetic person, it's so hard to just feel what you're feeling in that moment.
right, and even from like you to me, like I'll never understand like your experience as an athlete, and like you truly will never understand
Hmm.
mine. But luckily, we have this shared experience of like we know what it's like to be disabled, and it doesn't matter the like nuance of it at least. Um, but like to be disabled, talking to an able-bodied CrossFitter, they're doing things that we just sometimes can't even fathom doing.
Mhm.
and being able to communicate that with them of like, no, I see why you're giving me that cue, but like, here's why it's not helpful for me
Yeah.
because I can't move like that, or whatever it is.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. So we're going to jump to a lightning round. All right.
Okay,
It's a
I'm
few
ready.
quick questions. Here we go. All right. If there is one CrossFit movement that you could strike that would just never appear again, what would it be? If it were never
Bur-
programmed again?
Burpees of any kind.
Burpees of any kind, including
Yep.
burpee broad jumps.
Yep.
Okay. I thought maybe being a taller athlete, you might be like burpee broad jumps are fine, so you can get the leap.
No,
That kind
I
of thing.
got no rep at the games for my burpee broad jumps.
I got so many no reps.
But you want to know why? Because we had to put our hands where our feet were.
Yeah,
I can't move my body like that.
I can't either.
I
My
was like,
hamstrings. I know. I
yeah,
know. The judge was literally like, do this. And like she just bends over it
did
into like
it.
a perfect, someone who's perfectly able to bend like
Yeah.
that. And I go, I can't do that. And she just looks at me and I go, well, I
Well,
mean, it's okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely unfortunate because that definitely took a lot of wind out of my sails in that final
Yeah.
event. But
Yeah.
okay, all right. But this is a
Yeah.
lightning
But
round, not
burpees of
a
any kind.
yeah, not a grievances round.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your favorite movement in CrossFit?
Oh, my favorite.
Favorite.
Uh, I love a good clean. Anything shoulder to overhead. So dumbbell to overhead,
Yep.
barbell to overhead, anything like that I love.
All right.
Yeah.
And what is normally on your playlist when you're working out, if you're listening to music?
It might not come as a surprise to you, but I usually don't have a say in what I'm listening to. My coach just puts on what he feels like listening to, which is like 90s hip hop. Um,
Okay.
or if I'm listening to music, which is not very common, honestly, I'm listening to country.
Okay.
I don't know why. It depends on the workout, right? So like if I'm not trying to go like super hype
Yeah.
fast out of the gate, like country's perfect for me. But if I'm like trying to like bash this workout into the ground, it'll absolutely be like any sort of rap, like Drake, Kendrick Lamar,
Yes.
anything like
Yes.
that, just to like really get me going. But I honestly don't even like hear the music when I'm moving that quickly, so it doesn't even matter for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And final question of the lightning round.
Okay.
Uh, you're a prolific reader. We kind of connected over books that you read quite a bit. What is the last book that you read?
I am currently reading Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, his new book. And I think the last one I finished before that was The Women by Kristen Hanna. I
Oh, I'm going to
think
read
that was
that
the last
one.
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So as we're kind of wrapping up the conversation, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, or
Mm.
if you were to meet a young adaptive athlete today, maybe someone under 18, what would be an encouragement you would give them to either try CrossFit or try some sort of adaptive activity to get more
Mm.
connected with who they are?
I think I would say like what's the worst that could happen when you try? And I think that's something I still even say that to myself now. Um, but when I was a kid, it was very much of like, well, I'm not even going to try because
Mm,
I know I can't do that. I don't want to try it because then I'll fail, right? But now as an adult, it's like, okay, I'm trying things. And if you fail, you fail, but at least you tried.
yeah.
And even if you have to try multiple different avenues, just because one avenue fails doesn't mean the other four that you have are going to. Maybe you just need to figure out which one works for you, right?
Hmm.
And I genuinely have to tell myself that all the time now because someone, will give me a new movement to improve like my muscle ups. And the gymnastic coach will give me a new movement. I'm like, I sit there and I get so anxious. I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I'm like, but I have to try. And I try and it's no problem. But I still have that like automatic reflex of like, no, I'm not going to try that because I can't do it. I know I won't
Hmm.
be able to do what you're asking me to do. Um, so yeah, I think that would be the best recommendation because there's so many avenues. Like the world is not black and white. CrossFit is not black and white. There's so much gray area. And if you're willing to explore that gray area, I think you could find some really cool stuff.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there any adaptations that you're working on and movements that you're working towards mastering?
So I am on a bar muscle up journey. It's the bane of my existence, but we
Good,
are
good.
getting there.
Nice.
We are absolutely getting there. I had a really good bar muscle up day today. Uh, And like the main adaptation with that, right, is like I struggle from the hang.
Hmm.
That's where I am the weakest. Any sort of pulling is really hard for me because my hands are wide open on the rig. But once I'm able to get into like a press, like I said earlier, I love a good press. So like luckily for me, the easiest part is pressing out on the bar. Like if I could just if that was the bar muscle up, I would be owning everyone on that. So just
Yeah,
learning how to get from a weak movement, excuse me, a weak movement into a really strong movement is our main focus right now, and how I can kind of capitalize on that.
that's really cool. Well, I look
Yeah,
forward to hopefully seeing you rip up a bar muscle up
yeah,
in the next time we meet at
yeah,
a competition. Um,
100%. Because they keep programming them, so I've got to figure them out.
I know, and I love that the programming is getting a little bit spicier
It
for
is.
us. It's good.
It is. You know, they've never given us toast bar, but we've gotten bar muscle ups.
Really,
Yeah,
that is
and
interesting. You would
I
think.
love it. Love it. I love a good toaster bar. I'm like, just give me five. Just give me
Yeah.
five toaster bar, and I'll be happy.
Would you do them unbroken?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thanks so much for
yeah,
taking the time today, Jocelyn, to introduce yourself a little bit, have this conversation.
yeah,
It's so fun to kind of hear what your story's been like, but also how it can help someone who's just wondering what they can do to just take the next
yeah.
step and do something.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad we could chat about it.
Thanks, Jocelyn.
Anytime, Matt.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. You know, I loved how Jocelyn's coach Lamont said, quote, you don't have to do it this way. And I think for adaptive athletes, that's so true. You know, we tell ourselves that, oh, well, we just have to do it like other able-bodied athletes do that we see do amazing things. And the truth is, adaptive athletes, we need adaptations. That's why we're adaptive athletes. And a good coach, like Lamont is, would be able to say, hey, let's try something different. Let's try something different, not because you can't do that, but because if you do something a little bit differently, you'll probably get a better result. That's what adaptive athletes are looking for in their coaches. So that's what we're hoping to do through this podcast, is raise awareness about the stories of adaptive athletes, but also have those glimpses into what it's like to coach an adaptive athlete. And as you'll hear in other interviews too, what it's like when adaptive athletes are coaches. I mean, you'll be shocked to learn about how many adaptive athletes in our space have their CrossFit L1s and L2s and actively coach in the space. Speaking of upcoming episodes, we got a bunch of them in the can, and I can't wait to share them with you. So subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're literally everywhere. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. You can find us and subscribe to the podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at the Adaptive Athlete Pod and follow our episodes there. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll see you next time. The music for this episode was provided by It's Curve.